r/NoSleep. Posted by u/10minute horror. Never hold your breath, Part 1, The Drop-Off. That's what our first scuba instructor drilled into our heads. A family of 4 with underwater cameras was bound to take pictures, and most people instinctively held their breath when snapping them. But most first-timers also think they can save the oxygen in their tanks if they don't use it, and thus be able to stay down longer. That's not how it works. The more you hold your breath, the more oxygen becomes trapped in your lungs. As you ascend and the pressure from the deep eases off, your lungs expand to the point of tearing or collapsing altogether. Hence, never hold your breath. This is why I'm in critical condition in a remote hospital in northern Quebec. Well, one of the reasons. I'm currently being stabilized for the bends in a hyperbaric recom chamber, awaiting a series of operations to repair my lungs. Another half hour here, and I'll be getting sliced open. But there's something else. My older brother and I have been placed in strict isolation in separate hospitals, both of which are on red level lockdown. When we arrived, we brought in an infection. It spread to everyone we touched, and everyone they touched. I can see the same subtle honeycomb markings spreading on the skin of my mom and the doctors and nurses who first attended me. But I'll get to that later. Following the surgeries, if I wake up, I can't imagine myself ever stepping foot in water again. My brother, Clay, has been flown to a different hospital because there's only one of these chambers here. Our parents are split between the two, and our grandparents are flying in the morning. Clay's doing better than I am. Hopefully, he'll be okay. Please God, don't let it all be for nothing. I keep trying to fill in or make more sense of memories. I'm a bookworm after all. I read and apply. Read. And apply. But I can't. It all happened. It's all burned in there, like some midday nightmare spilling out into reality. 4 hours ago, Clay and I passed out on the shore of the cottage our family rented for the first week of summer break. Our parents found us on the beach, clinging to life. An hour later, we were in separate hospitals, decompressing. Even though I was actually feeling worse in that recom chamber, I did have more time to think. And I needed to play it through again. One more time. Arriving 2 days ago, we were disappointed that the lake, of which we were the only inhabitants, didn't allow fishing or scuba diving. Something about heritage restrictions, keeping the lake the way it should be. They probably should have included that in the listing. All Clay and I wanted to do was jump in and explore the depths. Mom and Dad were sticklers for rules, so our scuba gear stayed inside. But I guess our parents should have seen it coming. Not for me, I played inside the lane they set out. But Clay's lane didn't have lines. He was 18 and made of silver bullets. I was 16 and made of textbooks. We'd spent all morning on the beachfront backyard of our cottage, like we'd done the previous day. The lake was silent without any other cottages. The water was clear and looked like a Brita filter passed through it a few times. Clay was a water baby, and spent more time in the lake than on the beach. He had a crazy lung capacity and was free diving for longer and longer. I'd see him dip down for 30 seconds. A minute. Minute and a half. 2 minutes. Just enough for me to get nervous. And then he'd pop back up. But this time, he popped up and yelled my name, Jane. He yelled something about there being a drop-off straight down. Curious, but comfortable, I stayed put. But as always, Clay found his way back to the shore to try to pull me into whatever he was doing. He said there was a steady decline down the beach for about 30 feet, then it just drops straight down. He'd try to swim down to the bottom but it got too dark. Jokingly, I told him to tape a couple of glow sticks to a heavy rock and chuck it over the edge. 1 minute later, he came back, holding a roll of duct tape and 2 large glow sticks. He found a large rock down the shore and attached the glow sticks to each side of it. Clay hobbled past me lugging the large rock, a smile across his face. Sometimes, you had to admire him. I explored with my mind. He explored with his body. He was like a Jeep, and meant to be driven off-road. I guess you could say my mind was like a Jeep. It always scratched at information I didn't want to know about. Something pulled me to it. Okay, fine, I thought, he's already done all the work anyway. Let's see this drop-off. I got up to chase after him, but he yelled for me to grab a second rock to weigh me down. I found a pretty solid 20-pounder, and hobbled down the shore to the water. Clay was waiting for me and I caught up to him where the water was hip-deep. I followed him out until the water was at my chin and his chest. We gave each other nods, and dipped under the surface. Wow, even below surface the water was clear. I could see back to shore, and about 30 feet straight ahead. We kept moving forward, and I started to see the drop-off. Clay got to the edge first. I sided up next to him and looked down. Clay was right, it felt like a black abyss stared back up. The visibility was gone. Even without goggles, I could see pretty well underwater. But there was nothing. I might as well have had my eyes closed. A chill came over me. My knees twitched. My hands clutched the rock weighing me down. Clay's hand reached out and grabbed my shoulder, pulling me back. I didn't realize I'd been leaning forward and nearly let the weight of the rock carry me over. The call of the void. That's what they call it, I've heard. Sailors, commercial fishers, people who work large freight liners that spend weeks or months at sea. When you're standing on the edge of the ship, the furthermost point of the bow, looking down at the water splitting between the port and starboard. And you get that feeling, that urge to just step off. Even someone who's never thought about suicide before. Or been to sea. People with a fear of heights have something similar. But I always thought that was more the body's defense mechanism. I think the reason people don't like being close to that edge, whether a building or a ship, is because they don't trust themselves. That when there's nothing between them and an 80-foot drop straight down, they don't trust their body not to take them over. That was the feeling I had. The call of the void was like a magnet, pulling me. Thankfully Clay snapped me back to reality and now I had that burning starting in my lungs. I cracked the glow sticks on the side of the rock he held. We were washed in bright green. Clay leaned over the edge, and launched the rock as far as he could, which wasn't far, maybe 3 feet from our perch. It dropped, looking like a spaceship floating through space. We watched it drop through what looked like a thick brine pool but was more of a cloud than a pool. Sediment in the water? It reminded me of thick layers of marine snow. The glow sticks made the gray cloud turn green as they passed through and out the bottom. We could see the glow getting dimmer and dimmer. Then they stopped moving. They'd hit the bottom. Still visible, but pretty far down. And that was it for my lungs. I launched upwards to the surface, which was about 20 feet from the perch. Air tasted so good. You don't realize it until you need it and get it. But coming up from the perch felt different. Like I used more air in less time. Something wrapped around my ankle and pulled me down. Clay. He burst to the surface, laughing. I whacked him on the side of the head pretty hard, and called him an asshole. I started swimming back to shore. Clay called out that we should go down and check it out. It looked to only be another 50 feet down. There's no way my lungs could make it down there, so I laughed and kept back paddling to shore. I could tell Clay was annoyed. I'm sure he would have killed for me to have been a brother. Someone he could do all the stupid shit he thought up. But he was stuck with a brainy little sister. Back on shore, on my towel, I let the sun beat down on me. I'd check periodically for Clay to pop up, and sooner or later he always did. He eventually swam back in, spraying me with his excess water again before continuing up to the cottage to make lunch. I decided to go off on my own, wanting to explore the parts of the area I was allowed to. I walked along the shore for a kilometer or two. Around a bend, the lake slimmed down, coming to a pinch about 80 feet across. The lake continued on past the pinch and seemed to grow out into a much larger body of water. Who knows, it might even connect onto the St. Lawrence, and out to the ocean. Then I noticed something on both sides of the pinch. There were large cement slabs that looked like portions of a dam or locks. They'd been grown over with foliage and shrubs and looked ancient. It struck me how out of place they looked. The beautiful, untouched forestry and lake, then the two large, cement pillars with rusted metal. The only evidence man had ever been here. Aside from the cottage, of course. I trudged my way back to the cottage and found my parents on the back deck, huddled over Clay and his laptop. He'd found an arts and crafts fair online in the next county over, which was about a 45-minute drive. He was so obvious, I instantly figured out what he was up to. Since Clay and I wouldn't be going with them, and we'd be alone at the cottage for at least an hour and a half. That was more than enough time for what I imagined he wanted to do. Our parents, God love them, half-heartedly asked if we'd like to go with them before they left. As they drove out of sight, Clay turned to me with a smile and asked if I was ready. It didn't take us long to get our scuba gear out and ready, even with me trying to talk Clay out of the dive. It wasn't that we were going against my parents that bothered me. Or even that we'd get caught or in trouble. I had that pulling feeling that I felt on the perch. The magnet in my chest. The void. But that wasn't something I could explain to Clay. I couldn't even explain it to myself. And then there was that part of my brain that wanted to know more. It's the most powerful feeling I have. The need to know more. Even when my body didn't. The next thing I knew we were on the beach, geared up. We had a tank of air each, which would give us an hour underwater. Aside from our suits and gear, We each had a powerful underwater torch, and Clay carried a clear bag with about a dozen glow sticks and one flare. Those, with our headlamps, should be enough. We triple-checked our air gauges and readings, and everything came up green. We were ready to go. We swam, following the slope, letting it guide us downward. It was eerie swimming along the bottom and not being able to see the drop-off point until we were over it. We looked over the edge and saw the glowing green sticks, still pumping out light. I think they had about a 3-hour lifespan, so those two would be good for another hour maybe. Clay cracked 2 glow sticks and let them drop over the edge. They floated down slowly, getting caught in mini currents and spinning like tops before continuing through the gray brine cloud to the bottom. After both came to rest, Clay gave me the thumbs up. Our turn. As if on cue, there was the pull. The magnet in my chest. And over I went. I followed Clay, staying tied to his right blind. We dropped into the brine cloud, which was about 10 feet thick. I'd read about brine pools and how they naturally form, but this seemed to be a divider, separating one salinity of water from the next. Typically, nothing could live below the brine pool. Typically. But maybe it wasn't a brine pool or cloud. It also reminded me of marine snow. Organic waste, though more cloud-like. We passed through the cloud and the rock and glow sticks came into clear view on the other side. The closer we got to the glowing green, the more movement I saw at the bottom. Like the ground was swirling. I was surprised by how much visibility there was the deeper we went. The surface seemed miles away, but the ground below was clear. All the movement was coming from rows and rows of kelp stalks. Tall and swaying in the random currents. They reached up to us as we arrived at the bottom, like baskets of baby birds snapping up to be fed. We felt the light current pushing against us as we looked around at the bottom of what appeared to be a cliff. We floated in the small inlet before the kelp took over. All we could make out were the 6-foot-tall kelp stalks swaying like a dense cornfield. Then they stopped. The current died and the stalks froze in place, like they turned to trees. As they did, Clay's torch landed on something in the middle of the stalks. A pathway. Clay opened his bag and pulled out a glow stick. He swam towards the pathway and cracked the stick, letting it light the entrance. I wish those sticks didn't glow green. There's something about the way green light underwater affects its surroundings, making colors and objects blend into one another. It's a perfect camouflage down here. Of course, none of that bothered Clay, who was already cracking a second glow stick and dropping it 10 feet further down the path. I quickly caught up to him, shining my torch through the stalks which seemed to get thicker and thicker. My light created unnatural shadows that danced and made the stalks look like they were moving again. Something occurred to me. Who made this path? Was it naturally formed? Stop asking these questions, I thought. I kept following Clay as he continued along the path, dropping glow sticks. I assumed that was to help guide our way back. Like breadcrumbs. But the problem with dropping breadcrumbs is you've now left a trail for something to follow you. Stop it, Jane. The path was growing more narrow. The stalks crowded in on both sides. I couldn't see where we were headed. I decided to look back, and realized we weren't on a straight path. The path curved, so much so that I only saw one of the 4 glow sticks Clay dropped. What if we were on a spiraling path? One that just kept curving and didn't have an end? What if the entire bottom of this lake was a maze of these large kelp stalks? My mind kept racing. Then Clay stopped. Dead in his tracks. I pushed my way to his side to get a better view. But my eyes were lying to me, or was I hallucinating? Maybe too much nitrogen in my tank. Maybe not enough. There was no way what I was looking at was real. But Clay was staring at it too. That meant we both saw it. And it was real. Impossibly real. Then it all made sense. The pathway didn't lead through kelp stalks. That was a cornfield. And standing there, right in front of us, 70 feet underwater, was a house.